Hey guys, I'm excited today. I have Jillian, who I met on Instagram, and she has a lot of fantastic posts about the mystics and science and theology and everything like that. And I was just really interested, so I thought I'd ask her on the podcast. Jillian, you want to introduce yourself a little bit more?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. My name's Jillian Mason Shannon, and I encountered Kendall through. I have an Instagram called Neotopia, which is a word I created. It's Neo means new, topos is place, so it's sort of like a new place. And it's also implied in the name is like a new utopia. So it's a place to just kind of be free to deconstruct the kind of things that we grew up learning about theology, about God, religion, about the world, and take a new look at it through just introducing more rebellious figures in philosophy and theology and what they had to say. I'm in San Antonio, Texas, is where I live right now, and just kind of doing the good work.
Awesome. Yeah. And how did you kind of get to where you're at and explore these people and this type of theology?
I have to say, I grew up with a very healthy religious upbringing. My dad is a pastor or retired now, but very smart, intellectual, progressive, open-minded pastor. And I don't think a lot of people had the benefit of growing up like that. Most people I encounter seem more like they're recovering from the trauma of the way they grew up, but it was kind of the opposite for me. So I've always had a healthy relationship to these studies, and I always loved it, wanted to know more, saw it sort of like solving a riddle, getting into all this text and symbolism and history. But it took me a really long time to see it as more than just a hobby. I lived in New York for 15 years. I was there as being an actress and writer and everything. And I think that for a long time, I held on to that, even though it was really sort of life sucking. And because, you don't want to be a quitter.
Right.
But then I just realized this is more than a hobby for me. This is what gives me life. This is my passion. And I went to school for it. I went to Perkins School of Theology in 2020. And a lot of the people there, they knew what they wanted to do. They knew they wanted to be a pastor or they wanted to be a chaplain or something like that. I never knew what I wanted to do. I still don't technically. I just was following the passion, wanted to learn everything.
Yeah, that's great. I think that aspect of curiosity and wonder has carried me really far in my studies, and just that energy helps so much. And I think it also helps with the fear of change and changing beliefs and stuff like that. And if you can keep curiosity, then it helps you push past that fear and
Absolutely.
that shame that I can't change what the people I grew up with and what I was taught, like that's not allowed.
Exactly. Yeah, you nailed it.
I was curious, what denomination did you grow up in? Like, what did your dad? What?
Baptist.
Oh,
but
wow.
not Southern Baptist. Right. There's two different kinds of Baptists. Well, many different kinds of Baptists, but two main, and they couldn't be more different. To the point that a lot of people are questioning if they should even keep the Baptist name, right? But we are We were Progressive Baptist.
Right.
Cooperative Baptist is what it's called.
And that's even more rare because I live in Lubbock, so we're both in the same general area. Just
okay.
the Bible Belt, is.
Yeah, I didn't realize you were in Lubbock. Okay.
Right.
Cool.
So it's not super progressive. So it's cool to hear that you had that experience. I'm just curious, what did you find like soul sucking about being an actress and writing and stuff like that?
So actually, acting and writing is, of course, not soul sucking. It's great, but when you're an actor in New York, most people, at least I should just speak for myself, don't do a lot of acting. It's more the struggle to try to get some jobs, and so the majority of your time is not doing what you enjoy, and so it's more kind of.
You're trying to make it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then your whole life is that. And it's not very enjoyable.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I mean, after your grad school, and now you're starting a bookstore and you're putting in all these books, right? So in a way you're carrying on what you love and sharing that with others.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So today, specifically, wanted to focus on Teilhard De Chardin. And
you got it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, she helped me figure out the pronunciation before. Unusual name. But yeah, I think I just saw him kept popping up, his quotes and stuff like that. And then you shared some stuff about him. And I was like, man, I really like this guy. And I need to read his books. I haven't read it yet, but that's what you're here for, to kind of share about him.
All right. So Pierre Teilhard De Chardin, he's a French paleontologist. He died in the 1950s on Easter Sunday. And he was such an interesting guy, way ahead of his time in a lot of ways, which we'll discuss. But yeah, he was a paleontologist and a Jesuit priest. So he was a theologian and a scientist. And the Catholic Church banned his writings. I always like to look to the people who were banned personally, because usually they were on to something. It's like you were saying, most people are so afraid of change.
Right.
But what is it that they were curious about that everyone was so afraid of? So he was interesting because he was fascinated with matter, literally rocks. He was a geologist and a paleontologist, but he never rejected his Christian faith, his spirituality. He was trying to merge the two and find the spiritual in the matter. I would say, okay, so I also really love this author, Brian Thomas Swim. He's first a cosmologist and mathematician, but he's written some really great books, and he was influenced by Teilhard De Chardin. He never mentions God or religion or anything like that in his books, but he writes about science in such a romantic way.
Right, the spiritual aspect to it.
Yes, it's beautiful. And he has a really great illustration in his book called Journey of the Universe. And he's talking about kind of the early humans. And his illustration is, say you have a gazelle and you have a human being, and there's a huge forest fire. What are their reactions? The gazelle, instinctually, their animal instinct, they're going to run. It's survival. The human is also going to run, but there might be a moment there where they stop and they stare with curiosity and with wonder. And that little percent moment difference between the human and the animal is the thing that sets us apart. So we have this sense of wonderment, and reflection and curiosity and wonder allows for the capability to have compassion and empathy, not just for our loved ones. I mean, an animal would have that for, their offspring instinctually. We are even capable of having it for our enemies. So that little piece of reflection is the thing that sets us apart. It's the thing that makes us human. And I think that whatever sets us apart is our role. So if that's what sets us apart, then that is our role. And according to Teilhard, that's exactly what makes us unique. Teilhard has this quote that humanity is evolution become conscious of itself. Because we're both a product of evolution, and we're able to step outside of it, stand outside of it, and reflect on it. And reflect on the world, study it, analyze it, and even control its destiny. So with this ability to reflect, we can actually speed up the evolutionary process toward what Teilhard calls the noosphere and the omega point. Now, I'll obviously get into those.
Right. Yeah. I just want to say real quick, I've never connected curiosity with empathy, but that makes sense. It's like you have to, like we just said, get past that fear and all that resistance we have to people that are different for us or people that, are opposed to us. And what could their perspective be like? What could their life be like? How could we step into their shoes and,
precisely.
Yeah, have empathy in that takes curiosity. So that's fascinating. I love that.
Yeah. And so I thought it was also interesting that you said before, like, that curiosity is the main thing that's needed in order to get past our fear of change. And this whole field of study is about curiosity.
Right. Yeah, and so we're talking about evolution. That's probably one of the main reasons why the Catholic Church banned his books. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. People are very afraid of evolution. They think of Darwin or actually they think of neo-Darwinism. I would say that Darwin has sort of been taken out of what he was really saying and become what he was represented as. Anyway, but they're afraid of evolution as if it's counter to religion.
Right.
But what Teilhard was actually doing was making it very compatible with religion. And he was talking about evolution of consciousness and taking just sort of a panoramic view of the world to say, all right, it started with cosmogenesis and then biogenesis, or I would say the biosphere, which is the origin of life. And then we move into the noosphere, N-O-O sphere. And that is the sphere that sort of envelops the universe, and it's the sphere of knowing, of consciousness, the thinking sphere of the world. And he was saying that we are all in a process of moving toward what he called the omega point, which is the maximum level of consciousness, to the point of unity with God. That's the omega point.
That's where the mystic comes in. That's
where the mysticism. That's where the mysticism comes in. So it's interesting because you're talking science, but in order to have the correct sort of lens on science, it requires a mysticism. The way to be able to have this capacity to see the world both scientifically and spiritually is through the mystics, because the mystics are not afraid of change. They actually see the world constantly in flux rather than just static and fixed. And Yeah, the way is definitely through the mystics.
Yeah, and I think it's that they were seeking an experience of God and with God and that oneness. And I think in those experiences, it creates change in itself, and it helps us see the world in a new way or a bigger way. And
Mm-hmm.
going back to science, the way we have scientific discoveries and everything like that is that curiosity of that moments of intuition, of inspiration, of what about this hypothesis, and let's test this, and then we discover it. So
Exactly.
the first thing in science is that curiosity and that thinking outside the box to discover something new, and then going through the scientific process.
Exactly. Yes. Science is a lot about taking a leap of faith, saying something that may sound crazy and then trying to prove it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and going back to the evolution, one thing I've always thought about is, I think why some people are scared of Darwin and is kind of this survival of the fittest, and that's what evolution is. But to me, I'm like, well, that's like the basic level, the survival level. But the more evolved you get, the more conscious you get, then you realize survival is survival together, survival of everyone together. That's sort of
Beautiful.
unity and oneness. And so it becomes self-focus into all focus.
Ah, nice. Exactly. Yeah. So that's a good actually segue into understanding. Well, first of all, one of the things that we as humans did is we had the development of symbolic language. And so that's the creation of arts and culture in order to communicate our experiences and to help things evolve. And to the point where our experiences and our learnings outlive us. This is why culture is so important to pay attention to.
Right.
And it makes it more of a communal thing where we're sharing our experiences. It's not survival of the fittest. It's how can we all do this together and evolve as a world. And Teilhard, the noosphere is, like I said, the thinking sphere of the world, and it's about global consciousness. And okay, so I'm like, should I get into this?
Yeah, definitely get into it.
Okay. So another person that I admire, Elia Delio, she's often talking about the axial periods. And I find this so fascinating. So prior to, I want to say 800 BC, something like that, we were in pre-axial consciousness, and everyone was more tribal and symbolic and mythic.
Okay, I have to break it. Have you heard of spiral dynamics?
I've heard of it, but you're going to have to explain it to me.
It's not a big deal. You're basically, I'm sure you just have different language and different people saying different stuff, or it's saying the same thing in different, but it's just levels of consciousness, stages of consciousness, and it's individual, but it's also collective. So it's all the same thing. I actually been meaning to do an episode on spiral dynamics, but I haven't gotten to it yet. But
I would like to listen to it.
How my brain goes to, but you're saying the same thing, so keep going. You're doing wonderful.
Okay, interesting. Well, I'm going to have to listen to your episode on spiral dynamics because I don't know if it was you or someone else messaged me that and said it's like spiral dynamics, and I just have not. I don't know. I haven't been introduced to it.
It might have been me. I have to look.
It might have been you.
Okay, keep going.
Okay, so that was the consciousness at that time. It was tribal, mythic, ritualistic, and then there was a universal shift in consciousness. It was happening all over the world with the prophets in Israel and Buddha and Confucius and Socrates in Greece. These are all different parts of the world, and they're all sort of doing the same thing between, I think it's 800 and 400. No, I'm sorry, in 200 BC, and then came along Jesus. So what's the shift? The shift is moving from this tribal consciousness to the realization of being an individual. And the freedom of being an individual. And we're still sort of riding on our religion in that sense. Religion has become very personal with God, very individual salvation, and we're only right now, experiencing the second axial period. And it's the shift into global consciousness and collective thought. And that's due to the internet.
Right.
And
telephone, internet, all those things that connect us more.
Correct. Yeah. So we're able to see,
Yeah. I was just wondering, why, do you know why or how we shift into these new stages, and also how this spreads or not spreads, how it evolves at the same time between different cultures who, back then didn't necessarily know each other. So how does this?
Yeah. I don't know. Well, that's why it's so fascinating. It's like, why is this happening? Because they didn't have the internet.
Right.
They didn't have the ability to learn from each other, overseas. And so I don't know.
I just think of it like entanglement. Like there's some sort of
there you go.
Quantum. That's the only thing I can really
That's the answer. That's the answer. Yeah. We live in this web of connectivity, and that's why I guess it just sort of.
Yeah. There's also, I forget what it's called, but where someone discovers something and then it's discovered somewhere else and then discovered like a lot of times elsewhere. And they're like, oh yeah, they already discovered it, but it's all happening at once. And then also, same thing with sports, like setting a new time record. And it's like you could think that they would break this record, but then one person breaks it, and then 5 people break it like the next week. It's just this phenomenon.
Yeah, it's definitely something to do with this web of this entanglement that you're talking about.
Yeah,
everything is connected.
Right. Yeah. That's fascinating. It's awesome.
Yeah. So I said something just a little bit ago, collective thought, and I thought it would be important to clarify what I mean by that. Because I'm also very into this Simone Weil, and she is anti-collective thought. And so when I say like Teilhard is sort of, it sounds pro-collective thought.
Right.
We should clarify that it's not brainwashing. It's not we all just think the same thing. Rather, it's
hive mind. Yeah.
Is what you say?
Hive mind.
Right. It's not. It's not hive mind. It's like moving it forward. Being globally aware of what's going on. Like, for instance, because of social media, we are probably the most ethically conscious generation that there ever was. We are aware of how our choices here affect people in China, and we're just more globally aware. Right. But what you do is, rather than just copy each other and keep repeating slogans, you move it a step forward. It's still thinking for yourself, but it's with the goal of continually evolving.
Right. And I mean, we're still struggling with that.
We are.
I think it's like there's always an adjustment period. And so now we have this global feel and understanding, but how can we do this healthily? Because it's very hard for our brains to comprehend and use this information in a healthy way. And so I think we're in the process of learning that.
Yeah, we're in the dark space. We're yeah, it's happening so fast. People often say like Teilhard was too optimistic, but I think that ultimately the internet and social media is going to evolve us in a positive way. It already is, but it's definitely, everything has growing pains.
Well, I've said a couple times, I'm really into Carl Jung, and that we're unearthing our shadow of what collectively, globally is going wrong. And obviously that looks really dark, but it's better that we expose it so that we can deal with it rather than it staying in the dark.
Absolutely. Is it Carl Jung that says essentially there's a dark and a light to everything? And I don't know if he says those words, but I feel like he probably, yeah. His shadow self is very similar to Thomas Merton and talking about our false self.
Yeah.
Carl Jung is kind of a mystic, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree.
Yeah.
I keep getting you off track. Keep going.
Oh, that's okay. I don't even know where we are.
The collective and
the collective thought. Yeah. It reminds me of when I first got into grad school. My first year, I learned a very valuable lesson. I had a teacher who was very challenging, and now I'm super thankful, but he was teaching me the difference between making an assertion and making an argument. And I think that you see on social media, we're all sort of resharing great points, and it's hive mind. We're all, it's like we're just repeating slogans all the time. And when you're writing, for instance, like a scholarly paper, you can't just make emotional assertions that sound good. You have to make an argument. And to make an argument, you take what, this theologian said, or this person in the past. You're not just independently thinking either. You're taking it and you are then taking it one step further. You don't just come up with this great new idea. You just move the conversation an inch.
Right.
And I think for me, that was a valuable lesson learned in writing a scholarly paper, but it also applies to the difference between collective thought and as brainwashing and collective thought as evolving the conversation. And that's more what Teilhard was talking about when he says global consciousness. It's, yeah.
Yeah. And to go back to something we touched on before we started recording, are you a fan of Pete Enns?
Of who?
Pete Enns.
Yeah.
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 His latest book, Curveball, and I think I've mentioned this in podcasts before, but is talking about kind of phenomenology and near-death experiences and quantum, and just that we need to take into account where we are in different fields besides theology, and how does that impact our theology. And I think that if we're honest with ourselves, everything around us is affecting our theology, is infecting how we interpret theology in our subjective lenses. And so, I think it's good. People like, hey, we need to examine the Bible and the times that they were living in and how they saw it, because we're interpreting it through our modern lens, which may not be how they're interpreting it. So that helps us, but we need to continue that on. And how does what we've discovered and what we're learning, how is that affecting us today? And that's what Teilhard was all about, right? Using science and and he was in so many different fields, and how does that affect our theology and our understanding?
Yeah. What's Pete's book called?
Curveball.
Curveball. I'm going to check that out. Yeah. It's, not only does everything affect our theology, but our theology affects everything.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Our theology affects our ethics. You know, how we see God really translates to how we see ourselves and act in the world. If we see God as this domineering, controlling puppet master, we might act that way toward others. Mm-hmm. Whereas if we see God not through, you know, power, but through presence, and we might act more as a caring presence towards mm-hmm. others. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yes. That's a good point.
So you talk about the omega point. Mm-hmm. Where did he get that? I guess is the question I have.
Where did he get that?
Yeah. Where did that kind of come from?
I don't know. I think he created the term, and so when I posted about this, someone responded to me, why does the omega point have to be Christ? So Christ is the omega point for Teilhard, but he is trying to redefine Christ, redefine Christ mm-hmm. to where it's not just Jesus. While Christ was fully united. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me back up.
Consciousness?
Yeah. Yeah. Christ as full unity with God. Mm-hmm. But we tend to only relate Christ with Jesus, this man Jesus, mm-hmm. at this moment in time, as if Christ was his last name, you know? Mm-hmm. But Christ is more than Jesus. In Jesus, we saw a evolutionary leap in consciousness, perhaps, because we saw Christ being so united in the human person. But we can't stop there. We can't just say it happened in that moment, in that fixed, static moment in history. Christ is also, according to Teilhard, not just human and divine in that person, but also cosmic. So also still alive, still going. And we have to redefine what Christ is. And if Christ is the ultimate maximum level of consciousness, and the consciousness being that we belong to a whole, and rather than just separate entities, like let's say we all tend to identify with our secondary identifications. I'm white, I'm a female, I'm a Shannon, or I'm a Mason, you know, whatever my political ideology is. So, but those are all secondary. They're fine identifications, but they're secondary. So he's saying that this maximum level of consciousness is aware of belonging to a whole, of belonging in this entangled universe. Mm-hmm. So we saw it very clearly with the man Jesus, but he's saying that the omega point is larger, and it is something that we can all reach. Mm-hmm. That evolution is headed toward that. Right. Incarnation is not just this moment in time, but it is something possible for the whole cosmos.
Yeah.
Does that help? Yeah.
No, that's really good. I mean, I think it really takes me to The Universal Christ by Rohr, and how the word was in the beginning and it was sent out to all creation, and Jesus represented that and showed us, he reminded us of that. But yeah, I always think that, you know, we can debate and try to figure out what exactly atonement meant, but I can say without a doubt that it helped people psychologically get to a place of having a personal relationship with God, and no longer needing to have blood sacrifices. And so there was definitely an advancement, and kind of like if you're saying, that individual relationship with God. And I think Teilhard was connecting the kingdom of heaven. Jesus talking about bringing the kingdom of heaven on earth, connecting that with the evolutionary process that we are in this evolutionary process of growth, and like we said, each stage there's going to be an adjustment period, and there's always going to be problems where we have to figure that out. So a lot of people are like, just because it's new, we're actually going backwards, and it's like I think obviously a lot of problems arise, and not everything is just good. It's not a straight line, but I think it is evolving towards a better place, and we are ushering in the kingdom of heaven on earth, and learning what this Christ consciousness, how to live into that, into the fullness of humanity. And that goes into what we were saying about like sports or sciences and discoveries are making what is possible for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm with Teilhard on the optimism. I think it's always headed in a positive. Change is good. Not something to be afraid of. Yeah.
Right. Do you have more points that you wanted to go to?
Well, along those lines, there was one more thing that I love about Teilhard. He talks about groping, and this groping process. If you're looking at the biological or the biosphere, he says that elements. If you have two elements that are separate, they're always, in a sense, miraculously coming together. For instance, back with the first living cell, there were two detached elements which did miraculously come together to form the first living cell. And that is because of this characteristic in all living things to kind of reach outside itself, to kind of grope is the word he uses, in order to bond with other things, to persist in life. So life by its nature prefers more life. And that's why I think we can have this optimistic view that ultimately life prefers more life.
Right.
And down to the nature of things. So I don't think it's in the nature to prefer destruction.
Right.
Life is always going to keep trying to persist in more life.
I agree with you. I would add a little nuance. I believe in that. I think there is times for death, you could say, or burning off the old and bringing in new. Just like sometimes forests, they'll have natural burning forest fires, and that if the forest gets too over cluttered, then that actually helps it. Trees have space to breathe, and that can, in the end, create a larger forest. And then, I think that like Jesus on the cross and resurrection, or like you could say like the moth into a butterfly. There's all these metamorphoses, or like Phoenix is a symbol of that. There are, and Paul says, take up your cross daily, die daily. But then live in Christ. And so, like you said, the universe is always changing, and changing requires some death, but not death as in like that's the end. It's a reshaping, a reforming, growth in the long run. And even like scientifically, like energy is neither created nor destroyed. So even though we may die, like our energy is still in the universe, and it still takes on new forms. So it's kind of, and we see that with seasons as well. So I just see all these examples, and it's really, really beautiful.
Yeah. Hey, you are so right on. I mean, is death the enemy of life? Or is it a part of life, a necessary part of life in order to have more life?
Right.
Yeah. Beautiful. You know your stuff.
Thanks. I put a few quotes. I'm trying to think here.
Okay.
One of the quotes, he said that creation would not be complete until each person, participated being, is totally united with God through Christ in the pleroma. I don't know what that word means. When God will be all in all. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that? I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, it's okay. Creation, can you say it again?
Yes. Creation would not be complete until each participated being is totally united with God through Christ in the pleroma.
Okay. Yeah, I think that...
When God will be all in all.
Okay. Yeah, I think that speaks to the omega point, where the omega point is essentially God fully realized in all of us. So not only in Jesus of Nazareth, but in all of us and in the whole of creation. So creation's not finished. We tend to think that God created the world and here we are, and now we're all just destroying it. And
waiting for Jesus to come back and just
waiting exactly. But rather, it's still being created. It's still evolving, and it's not finished.
Do you have any hypothesis on what that might look like?
And what that might look like? Let's see. Well, for one thing, like you mentioned, Christ coming back, and I always find that to be such an interesting thing that people say, that Christ will return. Because on the other hand, I thought Christ was still present. Where did Christ go? I thought that that's what the Spirit is. And maybe the return is us. The return is the Spirit in us. And so it's when we ultimately use our participation with God for the betterment of the world. What is it going to look like? No idea.
Right. That's a really tough question.
Yeah.
I think from going to theology school that I think evangelicals know one. I forget what the word is for end times theology, but they have one belief of what that is. But there's actually like, I don't know, 5 or 6 different ones, and then obviously within those there's varying different beliefs on what that means. So it's never been set. Like Christians, we know what the end times is and what this means, and we're all agreed upon this one theory.
Yeah, you're saying that evangelistic Christians have this sort of apocalyptic worldview, right?
Right.
And yeah, no, it's definitely not agreed upon. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's all great. I was wondering. There's a couple of sci-fi books I read, and they talk about oneness, but one of them is Ender's Game. I don't know if you've heard of that.
What's it called?
Ender's Game.
No.
Okay. Well, spoilers here. He encounters an alien race, but basically they are like kind of bees, and they are this hive mind. And so there's this oneness, but they're all under the queen bee, right? And they're doing what she wants, and they don't have any mind of their own. And so that's kind of one view, and we did touch on that. Another sci-fi series is called The Expanse, and people encounter kind of an alien race is passed on, but their technology is still there, and so they kind of activate it, and then they all gain this telepathy between each other, but they're not used to it, and so basically it's kind of like schizophrenia. It's like, oh, I'm hearing what they're hearing and what this other person's, and it's just driving me mad, and it's kind of crazy. It was just interesting for me, and the mystics talk about this oneness with God, and how we're to have the mind of God and Christ, and hear Him, and then live through that. And so it's just interesting, these different points of view, and I kind of also think about this, and I've talked about on my podcast, like mental health, and I think Jung's quote is, I think it's Jung, is like the mystic swims in the ocean, the schizophrenic drowns or something. And so it's like,
oh wow,
I think it goes into consciousness, and how we have to be healthy and be at a certain place to kind of handle more of this oneness and this connection with the spiritual world, or we'll kind of be in this psychosis, or we'll just drown in it. But yeah, I don't know. It's just really, really interesting to me. And so I think we're on the path of gaining that understanding, that connection with the spiritual. And some people will have it, and some people will have it more than others. But it's a process we have to grow into. And I don't know. That's just some thoughts that I have.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have heard, we're in such a weird time right now with AI and Chat GPT, and
Right.
it can get really scary, and it's easy. I think it's easier to use to be afraid of it, right?
Right.
And to say, oh, we're just going toward, I'm scared for the next generation, and everything's going downhill. But I heard a very positive outlook on that. For instance, so okay, if kids are able to use AI and use this technology to their advantage, and what space does that open up? Could it be that schools have more room to care for people's mental health? Can we maybe evolve in the mental health arena if we are less worried about what am I trying to say? If we're not
talking about like AI being able to do some basic jobs, and so
or
that creates more opportunity for good.
Yeah, you're right. Specifically for schooling, though. So the automatic fear is, oh well, you're not going to be able to write your own paper. You're not going to learn anything, or you're going to be able to use AI to calculate that for you instead of using your brain. Well, what if we use that as a leap in learning and cleared up more space to focus on our mental health?
Right. Okay. I see. I think I see what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, I think there is that danger of losing creativity, but I think we use it the right way, it can spur on our creativity to new heights. And like you said, more time to focus more on mental emotional health, rather than like, I think of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like the basic needs and all this stuff, and the AI sort of take on that role of these things, so we could focus on the higher level of self transcendence and stuff like that. Go ahead.
What was that Jung quote that you said about the mystic?
Something, I think it's something like the mystic swims in the ocean that the schizophrenic drowns.
I'm trying to understand that.
I think, I would say that I believe that say like a schizophrenic, like there may be some voices they're hearing that is their own, but they may be hearing spirits or something, and maybe because they're in such a low place, they might be hearing demonic voices. But there's spiritual people like, oh, I hear angels, or I hear from God, or different stuff like that. And so it's just about being healthy and whole and connecting with the positive and loving voices.
I see. Okay. Yeah. So for a mystic, it's freeing, liberating,
Right.
to kind of swim in that ocean and discern the voices wherever
you have to be strong enough in your ego and yourself. Won't be kind of in that like hive mind, be taken over.
Got it. Got it. That's a great quote. Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's see about AI. I think AI also raises up questions again about what is consciousness and what is unique and special about humans. And I think we talked about the beginning is that creativity and that curiosity and creation and AI might help us highlight once again our unique capabilities and us focus more on that rather than just pure utility or survival or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. Great. I didn't make that link either. So if what makes us human different from animals, then it's also what makes us unique, different from robots.
Right.
This element of wonder, reflection, curiosity, empathy, compassion. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I wonder if we could, even delve deeper into that.
That's another episode I plan to have with someone who is more knowledgeable than me about AI and all the facets. It's really something that is hard to keep up with because it's constantly evolving and in more ways we're using it.
Rapidly, faster than we are able to evolve, right?
Which is part of the fear, it's like we can't keep up.
Yes, exactly.
So I think it is important to talk about these things and think about these things. And also it's like AI to me, it's you have to have it in the right hands to use it in a way that is helpful rather than just like more capitalism or just gaining wealth.
Yes. Or just replacing us. Yeah.
I was, going back to your name, how do you say that?
What was that? Neotopia? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really interested, I always love fiction reading of dystopian and utopian literature. And we're talking about this evolution of consciousness, this global oneness. And I think it's amazing, but, I think there's always a danger in being too negative about the world. But there's also a danger of being too positive and naive, you could say.
Yes.
Everybody being connected and collective. And we can see like communism and how people have these high ideals, but not taking into consideration how we also have the potential for harm and corruption, then it can all go awry. So it's that balance of the utopian, dystopian outlook.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt. I mean, when I said earlier that, what makes us unique, what our role is now we have a responsibility. We're able to control the destiny of evolution. And it is scary. Like we can't be all optimistic about this because look at climate change, look at the earth, look at the horrible things we've done to this planet. And so I think it goes back to the dystopian, the utopian, the element there is our participation in this, and understanding that if you believe in God, we are in cooperation with God. So our participation is vital. You and I spoke briefly about East of Eden, didn't we?
Oh yeah, we did. Yeah.
Yeah. East of Eden is really what got me deciding to go to school for this. Because there is a moment in that book where, do you remember the servant Lee? And he's speaking to, it's been so long since I read it, but two of the guys. And they are obsessing over this moment in scripture. It's Cain and Abel's story. And they're studying it and just trying to crack the code. And Lee says he finally figured it out. And the word that they were trying to decipher is the word timshel in Hebrew. And he said, okay, well, this is the difference. Some translations have it translated as thou shall, which means you will do this, as in God saying you will triumph over evil. It's predestined. And then other translations translate timshel as thou must, which is basically God's relationship to the human saying, you must. It's legalistic. You will or else,
Right.
And Lee very excitedly says he realizes that the translation of the word is actually thou mayest, which means you may triumph over evil. You may not. I am not predestining this. I am not ordering you or else punishing you. And so it's the freedom of choice. And it's saying, it's like the Spider-Man, with great freedom comes great responsibility. So it changes everything. He says that, Steinbeck says that may be the most important word in the world, because we actually have a choice in life. We're not being puppeteered. We're not being punished or demanded. We have a choice. And so it all goes back, this new utopia, it all goes back to our human participation with God. And we are co-agents along with nature in this world with God. And we have the ability to prevent suffering. We have the ability to cause suffering. And so that's why our level of consciousness and discernment with God becomes so vital, because we are not being just controlled or ordered to do a certain thing, but we are in this participation and cooperation with God. And so thou mayest or thou mayest not.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Really highlighting the free will. I don't know if you know who Naked Pastor is on.
I think I've heard of that. Is that a funny?
He does like little cartoons, but they have like a theological point.
Okay.
And I mean, you could look up his name and see why he's called that. But it's kind of about authenticity and being real and not just like naked. In that,
I think I have heard of him. Yeah.
But he had something about like be like Jesus, and Jesus is like be like yourself, and so it's like the most we can be like Jesus is being ourselves. And so what I'm saying about that is that I think God calls us to be. That's my podcast is called Becoming Who We Are, and learn who that is, and we all are a part of that body, and we're a unique body part, and we offer something unique, special. And so I think some people, think God, like that, like you said, is that it's controlling and is that like hive mind, but it's not. It's co-creation,
absolutely. Yes.
That the mystics all about that oneness with God, but they were still fully themselves and offering their unique gifts and perspectives and abilities for bringing the kingdom of heaven on earth.
Well, what's that which sets us apart is our role, right? So that whatever it is that makes us unique is probably our role in life, in this evolution of life. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. And something I I talked to someone and we talked about the mystics, and she's also like, there's the social justice aspect, and that's something I haven't got as much into, but I think that's very important. I see that you have books on that stuff as well. And we talked about like the need for balance between you could say the conservatives, the progressives, and the mystics, is that not just abandoning tradition and abandoning history and what it's taught us so we don't repeat the same mistakes again. And also, I think, you can say like non-denominational churches, they're like, we're doing our own thing, but they're still falling into the same mistakes or same beliefs as the past. And so it's better to acknowledge and learn from that than just try to
erase it and ignore it.
Erase it, exactly.
Yeah.
But also too, I think that some like mystics, what I really appreciate about Teilhard is that he was also practical in connecting the science with the mystical. And I think some people's may need to go to a cave and meditate or whatever. And I think that by their love, they're still helping the world. But for to participate in the world and community and that, social justice, stuff like that. But I do see some people, I think, like that maybe too skewed that way, or like the humanists. I think the trap they can fall into is having such an idealized view of humanity and what we should be, that they get very militaristic and angry when we fail and whatever.
Okay.
It's like, the mystics know we have that hope that's beyond the physical, beyond where we're at right now, and that is helping us. And so that gives us peace and joy through all the trials, and that it is a evolutionary process, and so it's not going to be perfect in this moment.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And there's a misconception about mystics, I think, or mystics or spiritual, that it's very individualistic or something, when in fact it's really the opposite. A true mystic should be pushed into community and relationship. Like Thomas Merton, he's one of the most famous mystics, and he was also an extreme social justice advocate. And he said that he saw within each person diamond. I think he said a diamond, like a diamond within each person that was their true self. And he realized, oh my gosh, in that moment, we are all united and connected. And so when you maybe the true mystic sees beyond the superficial and sees beyond the things that separate us and beyond all the things that could make us angry and all our differences, and sees that we have the potential for wholeness and unity and progress. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. I don't have anything else. Do you have any last words or thoughts?
Not really, but this has been super fun, and I love talking to someone that is you just are so well educated yourself, and you just get it. And it's been a joyful conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. I also really enjoyed you and all the wisdom you shared and everything you have to say. It's really a pleasure.
Thanks. Well, thanks for having me.
Awesome.